Okay, welcome to another An Evolving Man podcast. Today I'm very excited to be speaking to Simon Hinkly. Simon used to be a film producer and spent 50 years in the film industry. He now works as a mentor and still dreams of writing the perfect screenplay. He's been in the Mankind Project since 2003, where his mission is to grow elders. Welcome, Simon. Really
Thank you,
lovely to
Piers.
have you here.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
So the reason I reached out to Simon today was in the men's work that I do in the men's circles, the question came up about eldership. And therefore I thought, who better to ask than Simon? And we first met each other, it was about 5 years ago on a Mankind Project weekend. And I just remember your calm, loving presence. And I was like, oh, so I thought, who better to speak to about eldership? So thank you very much for agreeing to come and speak today.
Hmm.
So I'd just love you to share a little bit what began you on this journey of wanting to understand, your mission about how to grow eldership.
Hmm.
What began you on this journey?
Well, I'm just going to start off by giving you my mission. In the Mankind Project, we have a mission. We evolve a mission. And mine is I create a spontaneous world of free choice where men and women sit in safe circles, sharing their truth with courage and compassion. And that mission was born out of years of sitting in circles, hearing pain, basically, hearing pain and suffering and regret and trauma. So I had come from the film industry where I spent a lot of my time creating teams to go into countries, teams of men and women to go into countries, film technicians, to go into countries and make feature films and TV series, and above all, bring them out safely. I mean, we went to some difficult places. And in my time, I've worked with a lot of wonderfully interesting, wild, loquacious people. And I'm still here to tell the tale. And I still sometimes love the idea of the film industry. And other times I think, what a toxic place that was. It was a world of intrigue and avarice where competition was rife. And I realized that it was getting me into areas of life and addiction that I didn't enjoy. And luckily, I discovered the Mankind Project. My life has been committed to supporting men ever since in all the different ways that you can.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing about the film industry. Yeah, of course. Going to foreign countries. I sometimes have to look up online. What was a producer? What did they do? And because it seems quite abstract. So it's interesting you saying that. It kind of helps me to piece that together a bit.
Well, I suppose traditionally it's about money. It's about finance. It's about pulling people together. It's about exciting people with an opportunity. And I'm still caught up with that. Still caught up with that search for excitement. I hope it's a little more managed than it used to be.
Thank you. So I've got a list of questions I've sent Simon. So I'm just going to read through some of them, and they're kind of around eldership. And the first question I have is, I would love to hear you speak about being an elder and purpose. You know, the background is one man in his 70s was just speaking to me, and he said that since he has reached retirement, he's struggled with feeling that he has a purpose. How does he rekindle that again? How do we rekindle that?
Mm. Yes, purpose is something that's come into my life recently, very powerfully. I never really considered my purpose. But in the last few years, I'd lie awake in the morning and think, well, why am I on the planet? What am I here for? And an MKP man was working with purpose, and he suggested that I get involved too. And I'm part of a group of men and women across the world who are looking at their purpose. I mean, I might have remembered something about what society had in store for me when I was a kid. But it was so inconsequential, I let it go. And actually, what happened, then there was parental pressure. And my parents wanted me to be a doctor. And that didn't work out. And so if I lean into myself, I can listen to my wild cries. I've recently taken up chanting, maybe call it wild singing. And I've got this rattle here, and I sit every morning and I just do this, and I beat out the rhythm, and I find some words. I just sing the words. So here's a song I'm making up right now, and it's Piers and the podcast are riding out a way. Piers and the podcast are showing us the way. Go Piers, go podcast. And I'm just finding that, I mean, it's beautifully foolish. And it's that aspect of myself that I've never listened to. I've never allowed. That's right. I've never allowed. And it's about deciphering a new voice. It's my soul voice. And I've never listened to it before. So I think this purpose work is really interesting. I'm going to go on a vision quest. That's the culmination of the work. And as I'm sure you know, the vision quest is taking me into a place where I can be by myself, where for a couple of days I can fast. That in itself, that's a whole trip. You know, my dependence on food is enormous. It's groundbreaking. So I've found a place in Dartmoor, beautiful area, where there's a large rock, maybe 20 foot high, and it's got a split going all the way through it. And when I went there, I touched the rock and felt the heat of the sun had warmed the rock throughout the day. And I just imagined myself leaning back on this rock and sitting there and drinking my water and watching the world and listening to the world and listening to some sort of possibility that nature would send me some answers to questions that I had, that those answers would be probably silent, the silent answers of nature. You know, I'm quite touched by all of that. So coming back to your man who's retired, I think it's a hard place for some men. I think there's the danger that you feel no longer useful. And we ask men to take on that stuff. It's about functionality. We ask men to do that work, to support their families. And when it's time to let go of that, a lot of men have difficulties, I think. And they've discovered they haven't made any preparation for that time.
Mm.
They've not considered what still excites them.
Mm.
And so I think that's the question to ask yourself. What's important to me? What will make me get up in the morning? Do I want to learn to play golf?
Mm.
Or do I want to support my son's future? In the short term, do I want to wash my car? Or shall I learn an instrument or a language? It's about choices. And I think it's important now that we make the right choices. And I think any self-caring activity is a good choice.
Mm.
And understanding my purpose may involve me in deeper soul journeys. So that vision quest is really important to me. Okay, this is just one example. I'm reading some books by Joseph Campbell, Bill Plotkin. Here's an interesting book by Bill Plotkin,
Yeah, yeah.
The Journey of Soul Initiation,
Mm.
a field guide for visionaries, evolutionaries, and revolutionaries. And I'm finding out a lot of wisdom from him. I think it's something around listening to the voices. I mentioned that before, praying for a vision, praying that nature will offer that vision. And many of us have been taught from an early age to ignore those voices, those inner voices. And the irony is that those voices are the ones which animals and plants speak to us through. So my new sense of purpose is wanting to change that, wanting to listen, wanting to be attuned to what nature has to offer. And I think, as you pray and cry, you do so for those who have gone before you. It's your own dedicated long night of the soul. And so later in May, I'll get to experience mine.
Great. Sounds exciting.
So finally, I mean, with regard to your retired man, he's got to be encouraged to ask for support. And if he'd like, I'll offer mine.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. Thank you. As you share, I mean, just it's kind of coming to me, this idea of when we're younger, we're very much more outward. Would you say the elder years, it's like us going inward, and almost the idea as well as eldership, that we no longer almost go to the elders to ask for help or see that those teachings as wise as the indigenous tribes used to do?
Well, I think that's interesting about when you mention indigenous tribes. I mean, firstly, I'd like to say in MKP, we've tended to be interested in the Native American tribes and their history and their culture and their structures and their rituals. But what about our own indigenous tribes? There were something like 20 autonomous tribes at the time that Julius Caesar arrived in the UK around, what are we talking about, 50 BC, something like that. And those tribes had their own languages and their own history and their own legacy. And so you'd move around the country and somebody would say to you, what tribe are you from? Well, if somebody asks me what tribe I'm from, I don't know. And that's the way we have broken our connection with the land and with our indigenous past. So, I'm sad about that. And I'm, in some way, I'm interested in how we can bring back that knowledge.
Mm.
And I'm not suggesting that would be an easy matter, because my understanding is that the Celts and the Druids didn't leave written accounts.
Mm.
It was all voice carried.
Mm.
So maybe it's lost forever. I don't know.
Mm.
I did, in preparing for this this podcast, I did come across something that I thought was interesting. It's some ideas from the Cree tribe.
Mm. Mm.
And with the Crees, the elders emphasize listening and not asking why.
Mm.
Apparently, there is no word in the Cree language for why. I love that. A learner must sit quietly and patiently while the elder continues on his wisdom trail. Listening is considered to be very important. Questions were not encouraged. Asking questions was considered rude.
Mm.
So yeah, no word for why. And I'm just wondering what it would be like if I carried that into my life. And I imagined listening to my grandson, Monty, who's 7 years old and has got a lot of why.
Mm.
And I'm wondering what would happen if there was an encouragement to not ask questions. It's an interesting thought. Where are we?
Well, I was going to ask questions, and I'm like, well, I'll just leave some space for Simon to speak. So yeah, thank you. That makes sense around purpose. So thank you for sharing that. So I guess the next question really is, I'd love to hear you speak about the relationship between the king archetype and being elder.
Well, this is a subject dear to my heart.
Mm.
I know you and I have spoken about this before.
Mm.
We talked, I know, about this tendency we have in our world to, instead of encouraging the development from boys to men,
Mm.
we tend to encourage the development of boys to boys.
Mm.
And we seem to be inheriting a world where the boys are running the show. And whether it's, I'm thinking about laws, the construction, the creation and administering of laws, I think is done by boys.
Mm.
A friend of mine was part of the Shell 7 trial, which completed in London last week.
Mm.
And the judge instructed the jury to find the Shell 7 guilty.
Mm. Mm.
And the jurors asked to see a copy of the oath that they swore at the beginning of the case. And having seen it and spoken amongst themselves, they turned round to Judge Perrins and said, they're not guilty. They went against the instructions of the judge. And for that to happen, it strikes me that there is some sort of inherited boy features in the judges of this country.
Mm.
If juries are going to turn round and reject their ideas, I think that the boardrooms and the financial institutions, I mean, going right to the top, it's boys who are running our country.
Mm. Mm.
And so how can we change that? How can we allow those boys to develop? Well, our old friend Robert Bly has an interesting take on that. This is the book of his, The Sibling Society.
Right.
And I just want to read you a couple of lines from it, which illustrate this point. What is asked of adults now is that they stop going forward to retirement, to Costa Rica, to fortune, and turn to face the young siblings and the adolescents. One can imagine a field with the adolescents on one side of a line drawn on the earth and the adults on the other side looking into their eyes. The adult in our time is asked to reach his or her hand across the line and pull the youth into adulthood. That means, of course, that the adults will have to decide what genuine adulthood is. If the adults do not turn and walk up to this line and help pull the adolescents over, the adolescents will stay exactly where they are for another 20 or 30 years. If we don't turn to face the young ones, their detachment machines, which are louder and more persistent than ours, will say, I'm not a part of this family. And they will kill any real relationship with their parents. The parents have to know that.
Thank you, Simon. I've been reading a lot of Robert Bly's work, and I find it's very powerful, the idea of, which is partly why I reached out to you. I think he says in the first couple of pages of Iron John, you know, that the young boys need the older men. If they're messing up, they're messing around, then it's because of us as older men. And I had to make that reflection on Christmas. I was there with some scouts and we stood outside the 7-Eleven, and some kids came up quite drunk, and I could feel myself going, you know, what are they doing? And I was like, yeah, I have to take responsibility that I'm not stepping up and helping or supporting rather than blaming. And I feel that's what we often do.
Yeah.
Is
Yes. I think you were talking about the king archetype. I think that to me suggests wisdom and healing, and something about allowing his love to percolate. The king allows his love to percolate through the realm. And the king father, if there were such an archetype, is the one who is above all else. He's got to be present.
Yeah.
He's got to be there. And he's got to be fully involved in the development of the young people. I'm sorry, I'm a great reader, and
please do. It's great.
I've got another little nugget, and this is from our dear friend Rod Boothroyd.
Yeah.
Some of you will know this book. It's a reworking of the ideas in a book of the same title by two men, Robert Moore and Robert Gillette, which came out, I think, in the 50s. And Rod has taken this material and given us a guide. He's updated it for the 21st century. It's a beautiful book. And he says on this same topic, so if boys, and young men for that matter, have no fathers, elders, or mentors who embody the energy of the mature king, and who can demonstrate in every moment what it means to be a sovereign, how are they ever to learn the meaning of sovereignty, leadership, self-control, and self-determination for themselves? Sadly, most of them don't, and society pays the price. So I think we all know that price. We all have some connection with that price that society's paid. We've all got some of our own experience of that in our families, with our siblings, in the workplace, whatever. More sadness.
Yeah. And is that maybe a journey we have to go through, is going through this sadness and this grief? It's same as what Rod Boothwood says about, therefore we can then move into joy. But if we just don't look at it, Do you feel that's important for us in eldership, is feeling this sadness?
Well, yes, and I just bring it back to my own experience. I'm a father. I've got 3 daughters. I was an absent father, and a lot of my work has been around bringing myself back into some place where I can accept myself without shame for what I did, knowing that I'm a different man now and that I did the best I could then. And so we've got to do it together. We've got to go through this work together. It's no good dad off at his men's circle and mum off at her woman's circle. We've got to be in circles together. I think that's the starting point, that we have to take responsibility as man and woman for who we create, what we brought into the world. And I think the story is often, oh, mum's at home and dad's gone. Sometimes it's mum's gone and dad's at home. But I think we sometimes, as elders, certainly have to take responsibility and represent ourselves. And we have to sometimes, something about sharing our truth with a firm intention, and that we share the burden of the responsibility for our kids together. That's where it starts. And from that place, we can slowly change the climate. If we can support each other in making perhaps changes that need to occur to prevent the family going off the rails.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it was a quote by possibly Rod Boothroyd. Maybe it was Robert Moore saying that, if the children are running havoc in the house, it's like, where's the king?
Yes.
Yeah. Where is the king there to bring that eldership and that guidance?
Yes.
In. Thank you. Thank you. So, I mean, you've kind of started to speak a little bit about this. And so the question was, what does being an elder look like? And I kind of, what is an elder's role?
Yes. What is an elder's role? Well, I think Terry Jones, a US MKP elder, defined eldership as wisdom in an active state on behalf of others. Wisdom in an active state. I quite like that. And Erik Erikson, who's a psychologist, said that wisdom maintains and learns to convey the integrity of experience. The integrity of experience. Well, I suppose that's setting quite a high bar. I think one of the things that I would say is of cardinal importance about eldership is around death. I think an elder has to know about death. I think an elder has to know how to do death. I don't think it's about reaching a certain age. It's more about the manifesting maturity in however that maturity comes. I think it's possible to be a young elder. It's for me, it's about how you've lived your life. When did you stop feeling pressured to make money? When did you fight? When did you stop fighting your way to the top? When can you put your own needs on one side and be there for another? For a young man, maybe struggling with addiction. For a young woman dealing with a sense of hopelessness. Maybe for somebody who's frightened about a cancer diagnosis. So you ask about cultivating wisdom, and I think that's really good. How do we do that? Well, my way is to create a daily practice, to read, to meditate, to explore the land, to watch nature, um, to watch those hidden moments when nature reveals itself to you in an original way. I was leaning against an oak tree the other day, and I could feel the breeze on my cheek. I could smell the wood smoke from a fire nearby. And I looked up and I could see some movement. Beautiful, tall oak tree. And I realized, I thought it was a bat or a big insect, but it was a small bird. My partner explained it was a tree hopper. Never seen a tree hopper before. And it was camouflaged into the bark of the oak tree. It was indecipherable. And I think that's the sort of excitement that I get from watching nature and being with nature. For me, it's about harvesting those moments, and that in turn nourishes my soul, and that makes me feel comfortable in my own skin. And so that gives me some possibility of being with young men and being able to offer some life experience and run the risk of that, whatever I'm saying, being rejected. Because I think you have to be able to take that. You have to be able to take the slap in the face. I'm not saying you should anticipate it, but yeah, I think being comfortable in your own skin gives those people around you a sense of ease. And I think that's what's needed when supporting young people.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. It kind of brings me almost skipping questions slightly, but the idea of initiation is in Robert Moore's book, The Archetype of Initiation. He talks about these 3 stages. And he says the first stage is we have some crisis. The second stage is like an extraordinary space, a liminal space, a transformative space. But he says often we need an elder to bring us out of that. And I feel at the moment with men, certainly, this lack of initiation, young boys, men, like you say, we're boys.
Yeah.
So how do we bring that in? And I'd love you just to speak a little bit about, well, what is initiation? What is a rite of passage?
Yeah. Yes. Well, I got another quote for you.
Great.
Anthropologist Arnold van Gennep coined the phrase rites of passage. These rites, he said, honored the reality that life itself means to separate and to be reunited, to change form and to die and to be reborn. And there are always new thresholds to cross. The threshold of summer and winter, of a season and winter, of a season or a year, of a month or a night, the thresholds of birth, adolescent, maturity, and old age, the threshold of death. And that's what they'd celebrate in the tribe. Those passing overs, those thresholds. And we can do that. There's nothing stopping us do that. I have a granddaughter who's going to be born in a couple of weeks' time. And I'm talking to my daughter and my son-in-law. Well, what could they do? You know, they're very excited about this. Of course they are, bringing new life into the world. How would they like to mark that? What would they think would be appropriate? And they're asking me, well, what do you think? You know, what do you know about? And so there is an opportunity here, I believe, to maybe build some sort of ceremony. And that's what I'm encouraging them to do, to take a risk. I think the celebration of thresholds is really important. Yeah, I mean, on the weekend that MKP offer, which you've done and I've done, and we know a lot of other men who've done that. It's, I think we have seen at first hand what you get when a man is initiated. You get a man who shows up. You get a man who wants to be in integrity. And if he's not, he knows how to bring himself into integrity. That's a great gift. So on that weekend that you and I have done, there's the idea, well, there's several steps in that process. But we know about the descent. I think in some cultures it's called the severance. And you go into a place where the work is done, and then there is the opportunity to come back, to ascend, to return, and your return is celebrated, rightly so. And I think we're realizing that, just going back to boys for a minute, there are groups that are available for the honoring of a boy's journey. Just got a note here about, yes, being supportive of these niche organizations. I think you've probably heard of them. We have to empower these organizations. We have to get behind them. We have to bring them out into the light of day. They're niche at the moment, but they need our help, and it's probably mostly financial help, to allow them to have a base and have people, paid people, qualified people working there, where these boys can be initiated. I'm thinking of Boys to Men. I'm thinking of the very successful Band of Brothers.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of Stroud's very own Journeyman.
Yes.
And these organizations are saving lives. That's really what it comes down to. I think when a young lad is stretched emotionally in his family situation, or lack of that, he might call an end to it all. And we know male suicide figures they're a blot on the landscape. I mean, it's outrageous that we read about it and walk on.
Yeah.
And I think education in schools around these statistics and the causes of them that need to be put in place. I think there's an enormous opportunity for people to go into schools where in a few years' time, those people, or at the same time, those people are considering taking their own lives. And I think if we were able to find a way to better fund those organizations, I think things would change.
Yeah. So I'll put a link into the bottom of this talk. Great. For Journeyman. I did speak to someone there about coming on the podcast a few months ago, but that didn't come off. So I'll also put to Boys to Men and also the Band of Brothers. I feel it's such important work. I love what Robert Bly says about these young men. It's almost like just by being in an older man's presence, it's like a father figure or an uncle. It's like they're being fed. They don't need to be saying anything, but it's almost like this sustenance that they need. It's in their DNA that they need this. And often these boys are not getting this.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
It's really important work. And I, in MKP, there is a sort of a group of men who offer mentorship, but it's to MKP men who need it. And my interest would be somehow trying to expand that. So an area that I'd be really interested in would be around prisons and young offenders. And I know that Band of Brothers, their raison d'etre is the criminal justice system for young offenders, and they take a lot of young men who have just been released. I think that's really brave work. But I think we have, as you know, throughout the UK and in other countries where MKP exists, we have I groups, which is for the support of men who've become initiated and want to meet up once a week, once every other week, whatever, and do their work. And I think in those groups, there's an opportunity to be out in community as well as within. There's an opportunity to work outside those circles and to offer some skills and support. For instance, in prisons, I'd like to see MKP taking that on. I know it's a hot potato and it's quite political.
Interesting. Yeah.
I think on a local scale, it could be done.
Just comes to me, I do know someone who works as a prison chaplain, who's been going into prisons for many years, has an organization. So maybe I'll speak to you afterwards about that. Because I do see, it's such important work. When I was living in a Buddhist monastery, there was a few people who'd connected to that prison chaplaincy who ended up coming to the monastery because of that, and that really helped to change their lives. Thank you. So that's one thing I really loved about the Mankind Project is, as a man, I often felt very alone, that I had to do everything on my own. And after joining the Mankind Project, I felt, there's groups who are going out and doing these things. It's not just me trying to go out into the community. There's people there supporting. I loved watching the film The Work about them going into Folsom Prison. It was like, that just made me cry so much. But seeing these men doing the work.
Yes. It's interesting, isn't it, how we seem to be a little bit behind in those areas. I've not seen anything similar to the work. I'm sure it was not easy to organize that, to get access. But again, I think it's an area that we need to look at. And the idea of when we do the initiation weekends, we do them outside in the green, in nature. And that's beautiful. But there's also a case, I think, for taking over a disused factory or a disused school in an urban landscape, and literally throwing the place open and saying, look, we're offering something this weekend. Somehow we'd get funding to be able to do it without at zero cost, and say to young kids, come on in, come and see what we're doing. We're doing something here which could be of interest to you. And I think in a multiracial town, I imagine doing something like that in Bristol, and there would be some really good repercussions from that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So needed at the moment. So, as I said, time goes quite quickly. I think we've probably been on for about 45 minutes now. So time's gone quickly, hasn't it?
Yes, hasn't it?
So I guess the question I kind of had it's just to do with, eldership in about, and I know you've answered this in part, the idea about, do we have to be a certain age? Because some people come to me, like I was speaking to someone today who's in his 20s. And, to be an elder, do we need to be 50, 60, older, or can we start to cultivate that as younger men?
Well, I've always considered myself lucky because I retired from the film industry and was able to give a lot of time to MKP.
Mm-hmm.
And I was initiated at a time when some would say I was already an elder. And one of the things I think that determines how easily you can make those steps over into that eldership place is around, where you are in your own life in terms of, are you still working? Are you part of that maelstrom of emotions around success? Are you still needing to be successful in the workplace? And I think it's really difficult to be an elder if you are. Let me just check that. That's certainly my experience, because I think eldership is, for me, largely about being of service. And if I'm to be of service, I need the time to be able to give myself over to other people's issues. And I can't do that if I'm committing to working and arriving and departing at a place of work and so on. So I think I think young people, they've got their own journey. I don't think I wouldn't be looking for young men to be elders. I would look to them to learn how to accept responsibility for their lives and the lives of other people they're influencing.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Kind of makes me feel similar to my own journey. It's like initiation. Sometimes we choose initiation by going on an MKP weekend, a Mankind Project weekend, or sometimes we are put into that situation like a rite of passage, which is not our choosing.
Exactly. It's not our choosing. And that's often the very best time for that to occur, isn't it? When you feel your life is going down and down and down and down, and then it gets to the bottom. You cannot go any further.
Mm.
And that's a perfect time for that, to take on those changes.
So where would someone find, so what I almost sense is like at that point when we're going down and down, we need the elder. So in my own life, I had an elder come into my life in the form of an abbot at the monastery. I had an elder to help me. If you're going down and down and down, where do we find elders? Where would we find that support?
I wish I could answer that.
Mm, mm.
I don't know the answer. I suppose if the man is going down, it's unlikely that he has got a family structure to support him. I know some people say, well, actually, you're not ready. You're not ready to change direction yet. There's still a few more rungs of the ladder you've got to drop through. You've still got to go down. You've still got to get deeper into the shit before things are going to change. And obviously that's a harsh way of looking at it. But I don't know where you'd find that elder. You'd probably have to have some sixth sense that a family member or maybe somebody that you'd heard about. We don't have those sort of structures now, do we? I've heard you talk about scouts. And I know Cubs and Scouts is still very popular.
Mm.
I seem to remember something about there's so many kids that want to sign up. There aren't enough certified leaders
No.
to take on
Mm.
those kids.
No.
And I don't know. I don't think there are youth clubs. I mean, I went to a youth club. I learned everything I knew about boys and girls from my youth club.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't know that they exist anymore.
Not much. We have one locally, but I think it was next to the Scout Hut, but I originally went to volunteer there before I went to Scouts, but I think it's closed now. So yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that eldership. Yeah, it's like in the past, we would have known. I think it's in John Young's book, The Coyotes Guide, and maybe in one of his talks, this thing that a young child knows that there's 30 or 40 people in the village that they can go and speak to and share about a story.
Yes.
The elders are there. You can go and ask the grandmothers or the grandfathers.
Yeah.
And it's like we don't have that really now.
No.
We dismiss the older generation rather than going, there's so much wisdom there. So much wisdom there, so much life experience. And yeah.
I'm guessing that it's, as a young person, it's when you're fed a diet of grooming for the worship of celebrity, whether it's in sport or music or whatever. I think a lot of young people would risk going into that by whatever means they could, rather than connect with somebody who's older or elder. You know, that whole debate about being, am I an elder or am I an older?
Yeah.
And you know, that's back to see you on the golf course. You know, how can we change that? And we're coming out of a time in our lives when the desire for pleasure and turning away from reality, I believe, will come greater and will become greater and greater.
Yeah. There's a lovely, I think it's a video my wife might have showed me of this. This, I think it's a creche being opened in a retirement home.
Yes.
And the video of this old man who's very depressed, and this young girl's kind of, she's about 2 or 3, kind of tugging on his shoulder, and he's kind of, what is it? But within a few days, he's got this life, this vigor back, and it's like, it's that he has something to share the world. I think that's beautiful. Thank you, Simon. So, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom. I feel I've learned so much. Is there any last few words you'd like to say?
Well, I'd like to honor you for what you're doing. I know a little bit about what you do, the variety of work that you do in supporting people. And I'd just like to take a moment to thank you, Piers, for what you do. And these podcasts, I think, is a perfect example of the plethora of activities that you do. I think this is a great idea, and I wish you well with it.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. Thank you. And I really appreciate you supporting me on my journey with everything you've done. Thank you. I really, it feels, when I joined the Mankind Project, it was like feeling like I wasn't alone anymore, that there were benevolent men and women out there who I could turn to and go, can you help? I'm struggling. I've got this vision of working with young men.
Yeah.
Can someone help? So, so thank you. Thank
Mm.
you. So yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Simon, and thank you for the song. First time I've had a song on the podcast. So
Well, I'm gonna end with a song.
okay, great.
So this is for Piers. Thank you for what you do in supporting men, in supporting women. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Simon. Blessings.
Yeah, blessings to you.
Okay.
Take care, brother.
Bye bye.